Hey everyone, this is Chris Grenier. In today's Market Minute, I'm going to talk about the overall market in Orlando for a quick overview about why Orlando is not only a great place to live, but also a great place for investment opportunity. This question came particularly from a client of mine overseas who is an investor looking for income-producing properties who might not be too familiar with Orlando. Obviously, everybody's very familiar with the area when it comes to Walt Disney World, Universal Studios, SeaWorld, and all the tourist stuff, which undoubtedly brings in billions of dollars a year in economic activity from the tourist industry. Over 66 million visitors last year came to Orlando from all over the world. They're forecasting the amount of tourists to increase on average between 3 and 5% annually for over 80 million visitors by 2020, which obviously gives a massive amount of jobs, employment, new hotels being built at all times, and an enormous amount of rental demand from the short-term side of things, which is your vacation rentals. However, for more of your residential and long-term investment things, a lot of people don't necessarily think of when it comes to Orlando. You know, they obviously associate Orlando with Mickey Mouse and all of that good stuff. However, Orlando has enormous opportunity for everything else in between, including healthcare, education, R&D, and pretty much every single different type of economic demographic that's out there is right here in Orlando. Fortunately, Central Florida is a very cheap place for businesses to start. Florida has no state income tax. It is an absolute economic hub for a lot of places because Orlando sits right in the middle of Florida. We're 1 hour from the beaches on the East Coast, which is your Daytona Beach, Cocoa Beach, and then about an hour and a half from the beaches on the West Coast, which is Sarasota, Tampa, Clearwater. And those beaches are really cool. Those are basically like your white sand, your blue water. You would think you're in the Caribbean if you didn't know any different. But Orlando is also, like I said, smack dab in the middle of Florida, and you have Interstate 4 and I-95 and the Florida Turnpike, three major highways that go right through Orlando. So it's very easy to access South Florida, which is Miami, but then also North Florida as well, too, which is Jacksonville, and then obviously everywhere else in the country from I-95, that popular interstate, which goes all the way up the East Coast to, I believe that goes all the way up to New York City, actually. But with that being said, obviously transportation is a huge status right now in Orlando. It's very popular for that. The Orlando International Airport is being completely rebuilt to help maintain and really accommodate the 66, 67 million visitors that are coming in here this year. Obviously, when Orlando was built in the early 1920s and 1930s, nobody ever thought that it was going to be the world's #1 tourist destination. So it wasn't until about 1970, 1975 or so, that's when Orlando really became popular on the map thanks to Walt Disney World. That was the initial jolt that really put Orlando worldwide, and everybody started to know about it really quick. Because before then, Orlando, like I said, it was really kind of your basic city. Nobody would stop twice there. But fortunately, in the past 40 years, it went from a small-time city to the world's #1 tourist destination with a population of over 2.5 million people in Central Florida, consistently growing every year. Orlando is one of the quickest growing metros in the entire country with an average of about 2.2% of a population growth per annum. Unemployment here is actually below the national average of about 4.8%. The national average is about 5.1 right now. The actual median household income here is above the national average as well. And what's really great about that is the cost of living in Orlando is significantly less than a lot of other places in the country. Because like I said, Florida has no state income tax. Cost of goods here is slightly cheaper. Real estate here overall is a little bit cheaper than what it is in many other metros. Obviously, when you compare it to places like Miami or New York or Boston or Chicago, LA, it's absolutely a fraction of the price, fortunately. And so for a very young city, the opportunity here is substantially higher than what it is in many other places because the growth that Orlando has shown in just the past 15 years has been extraordinary, and then what it's going to be capable of doing over the next decade or two is just going to be absolutely exciting because you have so many things being built here, from a brand spanking new soccer or football club being built for the Orlando City soccer team. You have a brand new basketball and sports arena that was built, the Amway Center, which was built about 3 or 4 years ago, which hosts the Orlando Magic basketball team. The Citrus Bowl, which is another big sports facility that holds about 50 to 60,000 people, where they will have a lot of big concerts and a lot of big sporting events there. But then everything else in between, too. You have multiple hospitals being built. We're home to the second largest university in the entire country. University of Central Florida is located in Orlando. I believe right now there's about 62,000 students there. It's a massive campus, ton of students that go there, which obviously is a huge beneficial factor to a lot of people here in the local retail and housing, employment jobs. But overall, everybody loves Orlando. You can go anywhere else in the world, and everybody's going to be familiar with a handful of different places located throughout the entire globe. Obviously, New York City, Washington, D.C., London, maybe Dubai or something like that. But no matter where you are in the world, and I've been to China, Dubai, Singapore, Hong Kong, Ireland, UK, here, there, and everywhere, everybody always associates and is somehow familiar with Mickey Mouse, Orlando, and it's one of those places that's going to be consistently growing. So real estate here provides a massive opportunity for what you can get for your money. Now, obviously, with what an ROI, if you're talking about a 10% ROI on your money, that's great, and there are places around the world where you can achieve that, but there are very few places where you can achieve that type of ROI in such a stable economy that has been doing nothing but expanding and growing for the past 5 or 6 years. During the global financial crisis in 2008, in 2009, prices here absolutely crashed. The median price in Orlando in 2007, when things were at the absolute peak, was $267,000 was the average median household value. Now, right after the crash, in the bottom of the barrel, 2010, when we hit the absolute lowest points, the median price was only $99,000. Fortunately, since then, 2010, and we're now in 2016, the past 6 years, prices have only gone up. We're at an average right now of about $188,000. So prices have gone up typically 8 to 9 to 10% a year for the past 6 years, and that's providing a massive return for all of those investors 5 or 6 years ago who purchased property. Many people didn't buy property back then in the local market just because banks weren't lending. People were very afraid of the housing market. They weren't quite sure what it was going to do. I always say that we were very positive about being optimistic back then. We kind of had our fingers crossed and was hoping for the best. And fortunately, it all worked out. It's always good to be on the right side of history when you were telling people invest in property because the market's going to be going up. And fortunately, every single month for the past 6 months, values have gone up between 1 to 1.2% every month consistently. So when it comes to a capital appreciation point of view, real estate in Orlando is going to be doing fantastic for the next decade. Obviously, there are unforeseen circumstances that could arise. Nobody has a crystal ball, but when it comes to your basic economic activity and just look at overall facts, Orlando presents a massive, massive opportunity for capital growth. When it comes to rental demand, you have more people moving to Central Florida than almost anywhere else in the country. Over 1,000 people a day move to Florida, and a handful of those 1,000 are moving to Central Florida and all around here. So they need places to live, and they don't necessarily buy houses right away. Considering myself, for instance, I've now been living in Florida for a little over 7 years. I didn't buy my first home until a year and a half ago. Before then, I lived in condos and I rented properties just because you're not quite sure where you're going to settle in new areas. The first time you move to a big city, you might like one area, but you live in another, and vice versa. And you might change jobs, and obviously you learn the school districts. And there's obviously numerous factors that go into where you're going to live permanently. But fortunately, when it comes to renting a home, it's much, much more common here. So that's kind of a brief overview of what goes on in the Orlando market from pretty much your employment, your residential, and your tourist industry side of things. Now, fortunately, with what we do here particularly is not only sell properties at a wholesale price, which is basically your raw foreclosure price, with an included amount for renovations should there be any necessary. And after that, we hand it off to our third-party property management company who takes care of everything from A to Z. From collecting rent, from sourcing a tenant, to obviously handling day-to-day operations of the property itself. Because at the end of the day, a portfolio is what we're really looking after for you. We really want to build a portfolio from multiple properties that's generating enough income, whether you want to use it for your day-to-day living or for your retirement account, which a lot of people do as well too. But at the same side, you really have a consistent growth in asset appreciation as well as your rental income as well. So real estate has always been a secure investment no matter where you are in the world, but hopefully those are a couple of great reasons about why Orlando has been our chosen area of expertise. So this is Chris Grenier, and I got Jim Trapani right behind me heading out for a little bit somewhere. And thank you for your time today. Please check out my website, like my Facebook page, all that good stuff. Thank you very much for your time. I'll speak with you soon.